Okay, guys, I was able to resolve this technical issue that wasn't allowing the audio to go on. And so we left off that we wanted to watch this video about Hox genes. Remember, there's a genetic toolkit that appeared in Cambrian explosion and never left the animal world. These incredible tools of genes that we all share in the animal world. I'm gonna play the video and then I'm gonna move on with the presentation here.
Hox genes and the evolution of animal body plans. Animals have a variety of body plans. Flies have 6 legs, mice have 4, and millipedes have many. Scientists have proposed that changes in a group of similar genes called the Hox genes have created the diverse animal body plans we have today. To test this hypothesis, our lab has focused on crustaceans. Crustaceans are an excellent group of animals for studying body plan evolution because they have many different body plans. By examining Hox genes in crustaceans, we can understand how these genes have changed to produce new body plans. In particular, our lab focuses on the sandhopper. Let's stretch out the sandhopper body plan so we can see each segment. The sandhopper has antennae, many mouthparts, claws, forward walking legs, reverse walking legs, swimming legs, and anchoring legs. First, we figured out where each of the Hox genes is turned on. Then we deleted each of these Hox genes to see how this would affect the animal's body plan. For example, if you delete the Hox gene called abdominal A, the animal's backwards walking legs turn into forward walking legs, and the animal's swimming legs turn into anchoring legs. This means that abdominal A is necessary for making backwards walking legs and swimming legs. The portion of the body that turns on the abdominal A gene has changed over evolutionary time. If we look at other types of crustaceans, such as shrimp and pillbugs, we can see that the part of the body that turns on abdominal A has changed. This change leads to a difference in the body plan of these other crustaceans. Currently, we are starting to determine what is responsible for the changes in where abdominal A is turned on. By figuring out how this change happened, we can develop a better picture of how the Hox genes have changed over evolutionary time to produce new body plans.
All right, so we can move on. All right, so pretty interesting what they can do, right? All right, so now the next, pretty much our last concept I want to talk about is the concept of constraining evolution. We talked about this, the fact that we'll have the same genes that determine the body plans, even shared with insects. Talking about insects is interesting group. Remember when I told you that we have fossil record of Cambrian insects that are huge. Dragonflies, which actually haven't really changed much in terms of their body composition, they definitely have changed in terms of size. Dragonflies aren't as big as they used to be. Literally, they used to be like as big as a kitchen table. And we know because we have fossil record of that, and this is true for many other insects as well. So why aren't insects as big anymore? And remember, when we're talking about insects, I was stressing the point on the respiratory system, the tracheal system of insects, which is not such a good, efficient, a very passive system, and therefore oxygen passively goes through the system to reach the organism tissues. So you know that oxygen is energy. Oxygen, if you have more oxygen, you can become bigger. And so we think that the fact that there was a lot more oxygen in the atmosphere at that time allowed these insects to become so big, given the not so efficient respiratory system. So this phenomenon where the environment puts a constraint in evolution, in this case on the size of animals, is known as constraining evolution. Now, constraints on evolution, which represents limits in the size, or it could be like limits in the number of legs or number of wings or number of structures. So environment can put a big constraint on evolution, but it's not the only factor that can put a constraint on evolution. For instance, another factor, I already told you all of this talks about the tracheal system, okay? Another factor, look how big these scorpions were, oh my goodness. In the past, thank God they're not so big anymore. This could be the size of a dragonfly. This is obviously a reconstituted animal. Another constraint on evolution could be placed by as genetic factors, because of course the fact that only so many genes can be involved in the formation of certain structures could place a constraint in evolution, for instance, of number of limbs. So there is a reason why most of the tetrapods, the tetrapods have 4 limbs, or a transformation of 4 limbs in wings, but not more than that typically. And also we don't have so many fingers or toes, because there is only a certain number of genes that can regulate the development of these structures. And therefore, we don't see this massive amount of structures in organisms, but just enough, I guess we can say, for the organism to function. So all these phenomena are known as constraining evolution. So the limits that are put on development of structures or the size can be of different types, can be environmental, or it can be even genetic. So all these phenomena are known as constraining evolution. Remember that we talked about another phenomenon, which is convergent evolution. Constraining evolution and convergent evolution are 2 very different concepts. Do not please confuse the 2. All right, so we're pretty much done with the Cambrian explosion. I told you it was pretty short, but we're going to watch this video together, this one, and then you are required to watch the first live video on your own. It's almost an hour. As I said, you can watch it in the evening, sometimes that you want to kind of watch something interesting, okay, not the usual TV. It's very informative. Pay attention to it, that it's a moment for you to learn without really putting too much effort into it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this video here, although I wish it was a little bit more enlarged. Let me see if I can enlarge it real quick, this image. Sorry about that. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and watch it together. Hopefully the audio will be there. Yes.
A mere 542 million years ago, the Earth's landscape was a barren wilderness. 4 billion years after the planet's creation, no animals lived on the land. The most developed organisms were simple animals living in the oceans. Something extraordinary was happening in the seas. Over a period of 20 million years, at the beginning of a period called the Cambrian, an explosion of new animals developed below the water's surface. These later gave rise to most of the diversity of animal life that now exists on Earth. But the cause of this sudden burst of life, which geologists call the Cambrian explosion, remains a mystery.
The Cambrian explosion was really biology's big bang. Things went from moving very slowly along the seafloor without any predation to suddenly all the different type of ecologies that we find today. Life literally exploded.
What triggered the Cambrian explosion? We don't really know. There are many different possibilities, different hypotheses, and we've got to remember that cause and effect are often difficult to disentangle.
So what happened exactly? To try to understand it, you need to look a little bit farther back in the history of the Earth, to the Ediacaran period, which preceded the Cambrian. It was during this time that the first large animals evolved, but they were shell-less.
Before the Cambrian, we go into what's called the Ediacaran times. And this is an extraordinary interval where we have the seafloor populated by basically weird creatures. And quite frankly, we're not quite sure whether they're animals or something else entirely. These are organisms which seem to have mostly survived on absorbing nutrients from the seawater itself. They may not have had any gut. Some of them may be able to move. These creatures are principally soft-bodied, that is, they have no skeleton. And then they seem to more or less disappear as the Cambrian explosion kicks off.
After 45 million years of slow evolution, those weird creatures suddenly disappeared, to be replaced by those of the Cambrian. The first echinoderms appeared 540 million years ago. Starfish and sea urchins are their descendants. Brachiopods followed after some 10 million years. The trilobite, the Cambrian's most iconic fossil, joined the explosion towards its end. It showed up a few million years later. There are a number of theories about what happened that enabled these creatures to appear.
There's a theory, a hypothesis, suggesting that one of the factors that holding back the evolution of animal is the availability of oxygen. Photosynthesizers, things like cyanobacteria, algae, plants, make oxygen and organic carbon, and once the organic carbon is buried in the sediment, the oxygen is released in the ocean and the atmosphere for animals to use.
Prior to the Cambrian explosion, oxygen levels may have been too low for large, active animals to survive. But once those levels increased, larger animals were able to survive and proliferate.
Then animals burst and diversified in many different forms.
Evidence to support this theory of higher oxygen levels is scarce, but there may be a link to a phenomenon called snowball Earth. This was a long period of recurrent ice ages. When the glaciers melted, huge amounts of rock were exposed and eroded, pouring nutrients into the water. That encouraged the growth of photosynthetic algae, which would have caused oxygen levels to rise. But the last of the giant ice ages ended around 90 million years before the Cambrian.
Things like oxygen levels, which are fairly clearly increasing during this interval close to the Cambrian explosion, must have been important. But oxygen was accumulating already much before then.
Another theory for why the Cambrian explosion occurred is that minerals became increasingly available in the oceans due to post-glacial erosion. These could have been used for the construction of shells. But Cambrian shells were made from a range of materials. This suggests that they were the result of parallel evolution in different animal lines, not a single innovation. That means something encouraged them to develop on more than one occasion, and shells are costly to make. It's unlikely mere abundance of minerals would have been enough. Could a transformative innovation in the animals themselves be the explanation? One such innovation could be bilateral symmetry, which concentrates nerves and sense organs at an animal's front and encourages the development of an efficient gut with a mouth and an anus.
We're inventing nervous systems, we're inventing eyes and other sensory systems. We're learning how to move fast, how to swim effectively. So you have a whole cascade of feedbacks, and it's really trying to pinpoint, if you like, the trigger versus all the other consequences which flowed from that initial point.
The Cambrian explosion happens after a series of events, in my opinion. First, you need to have genetic building blocks to make an animal. You also need oxygen to support animals, to support animal metabolism. But that alone is not sufficient either. You also need a mechanism to drive the system into a runaway situation. You need to make the system work very fast. And one of the mechanisms to drive the system to a runaway situation is ecological feedback.
Ecological feedback, in this sense, refers to the interaction between predator and prey. During the Cambrian, predators evolved new mechanisms such as vision to track down their lunch.
A good part of what's happening in the Cambrian explosion must be the motor of ecological change. And one of the really big, important gear changes, so to speak, to pursue that analogy, is in the way in which predators and prey interact. Part of the explanation for the widespread development of skeletons must be the rise of predators. And we see other evidence in terms of mouth parts, even gut content sometimes. You can see what one animal has swallowed. And all these things suggest that we are moving into an ecology which is radically different from anything ever before. An integral part of this is the evolution of nervous systems. And nervous systems, of course, include ultimately brains, and ultimately, of course, when animals come onto land, and sometimes even in the oceans, big brains which start thinking. Aha.
Some believe the emergence of vision during the Cambrian period caused the rate of ecological change to accelerate.
I believe that vision must have played a significant role. I think the fact that that event coincides with the start of the Cambrian explosion possibly could indicate that vision was actually the only thing that was required to trigger the Cambrian explosion. Light today is the most powerful stimulus of all, and vision is the most powerful sense. When that's unleashed on the world for the first time, it's going to create chaos.
Now, the capability to sense light has been there for a long time. Even some bacteria has a way to sense light. Many microorganisms have a way to sense light. But the very complex eyes, they can very precisely position the prey. They can view 3 dimensions and allow the predators to very effectively catch the prey. That's a very important part of the ecological feedback that allows the Cambrian explosion to happen in a very rapid rate.
Now we had this pinpoint accuracy. A predator could spot a prey, and also because it's got its fast swimming part and hard part itself, it could get to that animal instantly and tear it apart. So that means now there's huge selection pressures on all those soft-bodied animals to evolve defenses against this, which means really hard parts. It means shields and spines, and also hard swimming parts to swim away itself.
But not everyone agrees.
Now, there's absolutely no doubt that eyes did evolve as part of the Cambrian explosion. My reservation with it is that eyes come in all sorts of shapes and forms. And primitive eyes are really little more than what we call eye spots. They're sensitive really to sort of shades of grey and white, and no more than that. And that's quite sufficient for the great majority of animals. They don't actually make an image on their eye. Whereas I think one of the dangers, if I may say so, of seeing evolution through our eyes is we have fantastically well-adapted eyes, which are the product of millions of years of evolution. And there's little doubt that those really sophisticated eyes only evolved a bit later.
There is one other possibility. The disappearance of the Ediacaran creatures may be the cause, not the consequence, of the Cambrian explosion. The explosion resembles the recovery from a mass extinction. Signs of a catastrophe 542 million years ago could easily have vanished by now, but that doesn't mean one didn't happen. Perhaps the bilateral ancestors of today's animals were simply hiding in the shadows of the Ediacaran world until opportunity knocked. Whatever actually did happen, though, they took that opportunity, with momentous consequences for the future.
Humans are direct descendants of the Cambrian explosion. We have primitive fish from deposits such as the Burgess Shale in Canada, which we can really say are our ancestors.
From the human point of view, the true significance of the Cambrian explosion is that Homo sapiens wouldn't be here if it hadn't happened.